We've certainly talked about a local and regional process very much envisaged out of Carmer-Langton.
But you wouldn't see it as a denouncement of the idea of that concept of a voice?
Well, no, our position in advocating against the referendum is that we think that we can create a very good structure to listen to Indigenous communities, and this Canberra bureaucracy is not the way to go.
And why would, like, if you legislated it, why is that not bureaucratic, but it is if it's in the Constitution?
Well, this is a local and regional structure, so it's listening to the communities that have been talked about earlier. I mean, the PM said this afternoon that the National Voice will probably have 24 members. So South Australia's allocation of members of a National Voice would be 2 people. Now, I don't know many Indigenous South Australians that would say, yeah, I think 2 Indigenous South Australians would adequately represent all of the communities amongst South Australia.
That's in the Carmer-Langton report, and maybe the
well, that's what the PM keeps telling us to look at, the Carmer-Langton report.
He needs to come and speak to the advisory group and come and speak to the working group and the engagement group that Minister Burney was part of. So that's not what we were wanting, and also that's the detail that will be worked out. And
the PM said it this afternoon, 24 people will be on this voice. That's the number he used in his radio.
This is my point. They're not talking to grassroots mob, they're talking to people they elect themselves. They need to leave us alone and let us less than 3% of the population vote on ourselves. If this fails, they need to let us vote on what we want as Aboriginal people without everybody else overriding our vote.
The issue is that a referendum, which is what we're heading towards on Saturday, is a binary vote. It's yes or no. That's all there is. There isn't another pile that says treaty. There isn't another pile that says progressive no. There is yes and no. There are 2 piles. So if you're voting no, you're voting with Clive Palmer, you're voting with Pauline Hanson,
voting with grassroots mob.
With Peter Dutton.
Well, I'm a grassroots.
And the other point that I'd make is that the Carmer-Langton report talked about 24. But the Prime Minister, I'm sure, also reflected that after the referendum, and this is so important for people to understand, that after the referendum, it is the role of the Parliament to decide the functions and the way in which the voice will operate. That is not what the referendum is about. The referendum is about recognition, and it's about how we want to recognise. It is simple, it is straightforward, and it is not all of these other issues that have been introduced to confuse and to create disinformation and misinformation. I promise you, sovereignty is preserved, and I promise you that this is a simple proposition that we're asking you to come on a journey with us.
I'll give you a quick response, James, and I say quick because we have not much longer.
All I'd say is we've been criticised for saying if you don't know, vote no. And the Prime Minister says, go and look at the Carmer-Langton report, that'll give you all the detail. Now the Minister just says that report's wrong, 24 is not what it's going to be.
It could be God knows what. That's not true.
At the end of the day, this is the problem that Australians are struggling with. They say, what is this thing? How's it going to work? What's the detail? Now we've just heard a revelation that even the one report they tell us to keep looking at can't now be relied on.
There's the voice principles and designs. There's the Uluru Statement from the Heart. There's reports from there. There's also the multiple reports from the referendum councils. There's been a report every year.
They all say different things.
Yeah, but there is also the design principles that are there on the website, on the Uluru Statement website, on the Yes23 website, and the Voice website.
Why don't you acknowledge sovereign law first? Why don't you acknowledge sovereign law first and what we want? Because I've sat up there with the elders in Alice Springs, all the way up to Darwin, all the way up to Tiwi, all the way up to my mother's country, WA, in the desert. I've sat with all of them and none of them knew about this. So explain that to me.
Natasha, sovereign rights are not affected.
Well, I have different information, Linda. I'm sorry.
Well, I appreciate and I respect
and I don't trust politicians. Look what they've done to us for over 250 years. I can't trust a pattern of behaviour that only leads us to destruction, like Dr. Gonda said. It's only going to lead us to more destruction.
Sally?
I mean, there is that mistrust in politicians. There's also mistrust in what we've seen in the media throughout this campaign. There's a lot of Trumpism elements that have come through. But for me, and what the elders said on the ground during the Uluru and those dialogues, they said, we need to be a part of this and we need to use their law, the Constitution, this rule book, and be a part of that and be in that. So it's not dismantled. The amount of times our voices and our opinions and the way that we get used to a program, how it's run, then the changing of government, they get away with it because they have a spang-dangled way new thing that they want to do because it's their legacy piece, not with the legacies of our communities. So they get away with it. And so what we're actually saying, no, let us use this, let us use our skills in this process. And Natasha, you keep talking about you're a grassroots person, so am I. I'm from a remote community and I'm sitting there with my elders and I know the women that I sit and talk to all the time want better outcomes for our kids and our young women across the country. And so this is something that is affecting all of us and we want to be
we can't be the only ones voting, right?
But that's not the way that the Constitution works.
Of course it isn't. Of course it isn't.
It's not.
Now, look, last night I pointed out that total government spending on Indigenous Australians was close to $40 billion a year, adjusting for inflation. The 2017 Productivity Commission report, or about double the average spend on the general community. Now, partly I said this was because Aboriginal people made more use of general programs like welfare, and partly because of Indigenous-specific programming. Here is what I said. The project hosts, well, they did a good job of trying to verbal him into thinking that his macro $40 billion budget number was somehow related to Canberra's National Indigenous Agency. That's what he didn't say that, they said that. In fact, he was talking about overall budget numbers, every dollar that governments around the country spend on Aboriginal people. And the truth is, Kamal was right. Taxpayers do spend around $40 billion a year on Aboriginal Australians. Kamal was right, and here's the evidence to prove it. The 2017 Indigenous Expenditure Report from the Productivity Commission. That's the federal government's own Productivity Commission. And here's the key points. It says, in the 2015-16 financial year, total direct government expenditure on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians was estimated to be $33.4 billion. It says in 2015-16, the estimated direct expenditure per person was $44,886 for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, which is around twice the rate for non-Indigenous Australians. Now, adjusting the 2016 figure in the Productivity Commission's report for inflation, well, that gives us now a figure of $39.5 billion in Aboriginal spending today. So Kamal last night on the project was actually spot on with his $40 billion figure. But that didn't stop the online leftist rag Crikey claiming that somehow I was trying to trick people, saying this morning that I had, and I quote, repeated a debunked myth that $40 billion had been spent on Indigenous programs every year. Crikey claimed that this had been fact-checked as false. Even a journalist at news.com, which is connected to News Corp papers in this station, Sky News, Shannon Malloy, well, Shannon Malloy fell for the trap because that's not what I said, as you've just seen. I said the total spending on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders was close to $40 billion, extrapolating that data from the Productivity Commission, adjusting it for inflation, and that number comprised both general spending and specific program spending. Now, if Malloy perhaps called me, I might have saved him the egg on his face. Indeed, the latest Productivity Commission report, this one's a draft report issued in July this year, so 2023, also refers to tens of billions of dollars of expenditure every year. So look, enough of the lies, enough of the misinformation and disinformation from the Yes Camp and lazy journalists. This is the federal government's own Productivity Commission. Now, don't verbal me. Don't try and pretend I don't know how to read a Commonwealth report or a budget paper. It's patronising beyond belief, and you'll get caught out, as you have been again tonight. Now, any wonder people are sceptical of the Voice? This is why it is now in such deep trouble.
I would never call no voters dinosaurs or anything else.
If you're a dinosaur, a dickhead, who can't be bothered reading, then vote no.
But you did call them dinosaurs.
No, I didn't.
And another word, your word, dickheads.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't.
If you're a dinosaur, a dickhead, who can't be bothered reading, then vote no.
You've seen my speech. What I said was that what I found offensive is this slogan, this stupid slogan, if you don't know, vote no.
If you don't know, vote no. What a stupid, nonsensical slogan that is.
Now, that is an endorsement of ignorance. If you don't know, find out what you don't know.
The no vote organisers also keep asking Albo for the details. What about the details? At this stage of the game, the details simply don't matter. They never did matter, honestly. They're irrelevant.
So read or talk to somebody, information. Don't vote as an ignorant person. Go and find out. That's what I said was, that's dinosaur stuff. But it's such an important vote. Please find out what it's about and then vote accordingly. If you then decide to vote no, that's fine.